Welcome to Certified Data Engineer Associate DEA-C01 Practice Exam Number 3. You'll get 30 exam-style questions. I will read each question, then give you a 10-second countdown to review the answer choices on screen. Feel free to pause the video if you need longer. After each countdown, I will reveal the correct answer and explanation. Question 1. A data engineer at Northwind is planning a migration of 5 TB of data from an on-premises Hadoop cluster's HDFS to Amazon S3. The migration will occur weekly for the next 6 months, with each transfer needing to complete within 24 hours. The company has a 1 Gbps AWS Direct Connect link with 60% available bandwidth. The solution must validate data integrity automatically and support incremental transfers to avoid reprocessing unchanged files. Which AWS service should the data engineer use? Select one, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. Oz DataSync natively supports HDFS as a source location by deploying an agent on-premises that communicates directly with name nodes and data nodes. At 600 Mbps, 60% of 1 Gbps, 5 TB can be transferred in approximately 18.5 hours, well within the 24-hour window. DataSync provides built-in data integrity verification through checksums during and after transfer, incremental transfer capability that only sends changed data on subsequent runs, bandwidth throttling to protect other traffic, and scheduling for recurring tasks. AWS Snowball Edge is designed for offline transfers where network bandwidth is insufficient, but 600 Mbps is more than adequate for 5 TB weekly transfers, and the logistics of ordering, shipping, loading, and returning devices weekly would be operationally impractical. Oz CLI does not natively support HDFS as a source and lacks data syncs optimizations such as automatic integrity validation, incremental transfers, inline compression, and parallel transfer streams. Oz Transfer Family provides managed SFTP/FTPS/FTP endpoints for file transfers to S3 or EFS, but does not support HDFS as a source protocol. Question 2. A data engineer at Fabricam IoT collects sensor data from 10,000 devices into an Amazon Kinesis data stream. A KCL application processes the stream and writes results to DynamoDB. The engineer notices that the KCL application's DynamoDB lease table is experiencing write throttling. The CloudWatch metrics show that the lease table is in provisioned mode with auto-scaling enabled, but the scaling is not fast enough to handle spikes during shard resharding operations. What should the data engineer do to resolve the lease table throttling? Select one, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. The KCL uses a DynamoDB lease table for checkpointing and shard coordination. During resharding operations, the lease table experiences write spikes as new shard leases are created and old ones updated. Switching to on-demand capacity mode eliminates throttling by instantly accommodating unpredictable write spikes without waiting for auto-scaling to react. Increasing provisioned capacity and auto-scaling maximum may help, but auto-scaling has a reaction delay that cannot handle sudden spikes during resharding. Reducing KCL workers would reduce processing capacity and could cause consumer lag. Lambda event source mapping for Kinesis uses its own internal checkpointing mechanism, but does not provide the same level of control as KCL for complex processing scenarios and changes the entire processing architecture. Question 3. Contoso Data Services uses Amazon Athena to query data stored in Amazon S3 as Apache Iceberg tables. The team needs to investigate a data quality issue that occurred 3 days ago and compare the current state of a table with its state at that point in time. They also need to roll back specific rows that were incorrectly updated. Which combination of Iceberg capabilities in Athena supports these requirements? Select 2, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option C. Apache Iceberg tables in Athena support time travel queries using the AS of timestamp syntax, which allows querying any historical snapshot within the retention period. This enables the team to compare the current table state with the state from 3 days ago without any data movement or restoration. The merge into statement provides full DML capability to selectively update specific rows based on conditions, allowing the team to roll back only the incorrectly updated rows by merging the historical values back into the current table. Recataloging with a glue crawler does not provide point-in-time access to Iceberg table snapshots, which are managed through Iceberg metadata. Exporting to S3 and comparing with Databrew adds unnecessary operational overhead when Iceberg's built-in time travel provides direct comparison capability. Restoring S3 bucket versions would affect all data in the bucket and break Iceberg's metadata consistency. Question 4. A data engineering team needs to process a variable number of S3 log files in parallel within an AWS step functions workflow, applying the same parse, validate, and transform steps to each file dynamically. Which step function state enables this pattern? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. The map state iterates over a collection of items and applies the same set of workflow steps to each item in parallel or sequentially, making it ideal for dynamically processing arrays of inputs like S3 log files without manually defining separate branches for each file. It supports both inline mode for moderate concurrency and distributed mode for up to 10,000 parallel child executions. The parallel state runs multiple explicitly defined, fixed branches concurrently, which requires knowing the exact branches at design time and cannot dynamically iterate over a variable number of items. The task state executes a single unit of work and must be combined with other states to handle iteration. The pass state passes input to output unchanged and is used for data reshaping or placeholder logic during development, not for executing transformations. Question 5. A company has 5 TB of infrequently accessed data in Amazon Redshift and wants to reduce storage costs while retaining the ability to query the data. Which solution best meets this requirement? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. The unload command exports the results of a Redshift SQL query to S3 in multiple formats, including Apache Parquet. Parquet's columnar compression typically reduces storage size by 60 to 80% compared to row-based formats, significantly lowering S3 storage costs compared to keeping data in Redshift. Once in S3, Redshift Spectrum allows querying the Parquet data directly through the Glue data catalog using the same SQL interface the team already uses, with per terabyte scan pricing that is much lower than maintaining equivalent data in Redshift's managed storage. The copy command is used to load data from S3 into Redshift tables. It operates in the opposite direction of what is needed for this export scenario. Redshift Spectrum creates external tables that reference data already in S3. It does not move data from Redshift to S3 and cannot be configured to point to Redshift's internal storage. Keeping all data in Redshift maintains the current storage costs without reduction, directly contrary to the goal of reducing expenses for infrequently accessed data. Question 6. A data engineer at Fabricam Pharma needs to configure an Amazon SQS FIFO queue to handle clinical trial data submissions. The system must process exactly 15,000 messages per second, with strict ordering per trial site, 200 sites, and exactly once delivery. Each message is approximately 2 KB. What should the data engineer configure? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option C. SQS FIFO queues with high throughput mode support up to 30,000 transactions per second, easily handling the 15,000 messages per second requirement. Using the trial site identifier as the message group ID ensures strict ordering within each trial site while allowing parallel processing across different sites. This is the simplest configuration meeting all requirements. Standard queues provide at least once delivery, not exactly once, violating the requirement even with application-level deduplication. Creating 200 separate queues adds massive operational overhead and complexity. Using a single message group ID for all messages serializes all processing through one partition, severely limiting throughput well below 15,000 messages per second. Question 7. Fabricam Shipping uses Amazon Kinesis data streams with the Kinesis Producer Library, KPL, to send shipment tracking events from 5,000 distribution centers. Each event is approximately 500 bytes. The KPL is configured with aggregation enabled. A downstream OS Lambda function processes these events but is receiving records it cannot parse. What is the most likely cause and solution? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. When KPL aggregation is enabled, multiple user records are packed into a single Kinesis record up to the 1 MB limit. The aggregated record uses a specific binary format with a protobuf header. Unlike the Kinesis Client Library, KCL, which automatically handles deaggregation, Lambda does not natively deaggregate KPL records. The Lambda function must include a KPL deaggregation module to unpack the aggregated records into individual user records. KPL collection refers to batching multiple Kinesis records into a single PutRecords API call, which does not affect how individual records are formatted or consumed. The issue is a parsing problem, not a timeout issue. KPL aggregation is unrelated to encryption settings and works with server-side encryption enabled. Question 8. Contoso Engineering is migrating from Apache Airflow running on Amazon EC01 to Amazon MWAA. The team has DAG files, a requirements.txt for Python dependencies, and a custom plugins directory. A data engineer needs to configure the MWAA environment correctly. Which combination of steps must the data engineer perform? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option B. Amazon MWAA requires DAG files to be stored in the DAG/folder of an S3 bucket, and the S3 path must be specified during environment creation. New DAGs sync within approximately 300 seconds and updates within about 30 seconds. Custom plugins must be packaged as a plugin zip file and uploaded to the same S3 bucket. MWAA environments must run in private subnets with a NAT gateway for internet access, not public subnets. MWAA is a managed service that handles compute resources internally and does not use customer-specified EC01 instance types. MWAA uses S3 for DAG storage, not Amazon IFS. Question 9. Adatum Technologies runs an EMR cluster processing large-scale log data from S3. The cluster has 3 core nodes and 10 task nodes. To optimize costs, the data engineer wants to use spot instances where appropriate. However, the team experienced data loss when spot instances were reclaimed during a previous job run. Which node configuration should the data engineer implement to optimize costs while preventing data loss? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. The primary node must run on on-demand instances because it manages the cluster, and losing it terminates the entire cluster. Core nodes must also run on on-demand instances because they host HDFS data node processes. Losing core nodes means losing HDFS data blocks, which was the cause of the previous data loss. Task nodes only run processing tasks and do not store HDFS data, making them ideal candidates for spot instances since their termination only affects in-progress task execution, which can be retried. Using spot instances for core nodes risks HDFS data loss when instances are reclaimed. Using spot for the primary node risks losing the entire cluster. While reserved instances could reduce costs for core nodes, the question asks about spot optimization, and the key principle is that HDFS hosting core nodes and the cluster managing primary node should never use spot instances. Question 10. A company's Glue ETL pipeline loads data from S3 into Redshift using Truncate before inserting new data. Jobs are getting stuck due to an access share lock held by application queries. Which two steps resolve this problem? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are Option A and Option B. Resolving a locking conflict in Redshift requires first identifying the blocking session and then terminating it. Querying Redshift system tables such as SDV LOCKS joined with SDV sessions or SDL sessions surfaces the process ID of the session holding the access share lock that is preventing Truncate from acquiring its required access exclusive lock. Once identified, PG terminate backend called with that process ID forcibly ends the blocking session and releases all its locks, allowing the queued Truncate to proceed. The vacuum command reclaims disk space from deleted rows and resorts data. It has no mechanism to release locks held by active sessions and would itself queue behind the existing lock contention. Explain generates a query execution plan for optimization analysis. It is a read-only diagnostic tool and cannot interact with or release active locks. REINDEX rebuilds table indexes to restore query efficiency, but like vacuum, cannot release locks held by other active sessions and would also be blocked by the existing lock. Question 11. Fabricam Insurance processes insurance claims through an AWS Glue ETL job that reads CSV files from Amazon S3. New claims files arrive daily in a partition structure, year/month/day. The job must process only new files and skip previously processed data. During testing, the team notices that the job reprocesses all historical files on every run. Which combination of actions should the data engineer take to ensure the job processes only new data? Select 2. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are Option A and Option C. Oz Glue job bookmarks track previously processed data to prevent reprocessing. For S3 sources, bookmarks track file timestamps to identify new files. 2 actions are required. First, enabling job bookmarks by setting the bookmark state to enabled in the job configuration. And second, including the transformation CTX parameter for each data source in the ETL script. The transformation CTX parameter indexes the bookmark state per source, allowing the job to correctly track which data has been processed from each source. Without transformation CTX, the bookmark cannot properly associate state with individual data sources. Configuring the crawler with crawl new folders only affects schema detection by the crawler, not data processing by the ETL job. Converting to Parquet improves query performance but does not address reprocessing. Flex execution mode affects job scheduling and cost, not data processing behavior. Question 12. Contoso Analytics operates an Amazon Redshift cluster with R-A3 nodes. The cluster stores 5 TB of sales data. A partner company in a different AWS account needs read-only access to a subset of the sales data for joint analytics. The data engineer must share the data without copying it or moving it to S3. Which solution should the data engineer implement? Select 1. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is Option A. Redshift data sharing enables live, cross-cluster access to data without copying it. By creating views that contain only the required subset of columns and tables, and adding those views to a data share, the partner account's Redshift cluster can query the data in real time. Data sharing requires R-A3 nodes, which this cluster uses and supports cross-account sharing. Federated queries in Redshift connect to RDS and Aurora PostgreSQL databases, not to other Redshift clusters. Exporting to S3 with unload creates a copy of the data, which contradicts the requirement of not copying data. VPC peering would allow network connectivity, but does not provide controlled, granular data access and would require sharing database credentials. Question 13. A company develops an application to transform data using containers on Amazon EKS with EC01 nodes. Each container processes distinct datasets and stores results in a data lake. Data sharing between containers is not permitted. Which storage solution provides the lowest latency for container data access? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option D. An ephemeral volume backed by the EC01 node's RAM provides in-process memory access with no network latency, delivering the lowest possible latency for temporary dataset storage. Since each container processes a distinct dataset without sharing, there is no need for shared persistent storage, making local ephemeral volumes the ideal choice. The volume exists only for the pod's lifetime, which aligns with the temporary processing requirement. Amazon EFS-backed persistent volumes require network I/O to reach the managed file service, adding network latency that exceeds local RAM access even at low network round-trip times. MemoryDB for RDS is an external in-memory database service that requires network calls for every read and write operation, making it inherently slower than local node RAM despite sub-millisecond network latency. DynamoDB Accelerator is an in-memory cache for DynamoDB that also requires network connectivity to reach the DAX cluster endpoint, adding unavoidable network overhead compared to local ephemeral storage. Question 14. Contoso Analytics has a data lake on Amazon S3 with tables registered in the AWS Glue data catalog. The company is gradually migrating from IAM-based access control to AWS Lake Formation permissions. During the transition, some teams must continue using their existing IAM policies, while other teams use Lake Formation permissions on the same tables. Which Lake Formation feature enables this coexistence? Select one, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. Lake Formation Hybrid Access Mode enables two permission pathways to coexist on the same Glue data catalog resources. Specific principals can be opted in to use Lake Formation permissions, while all other principals continue to access the same resources through their existing IAM policies for Amazon S3 and AWS Glue actions. This allows incremental, selective migration to Lake Formation without disrupting existing workloads. LFTags provide scalable tag-based access control within Lake Formation, but do not address the coexistence of IAM and Lake Formation permission models. Cross-account sharing via OSRAM enables sharing resources across accounts, but does not solve the IAM to Lake Formation migration challenge. Data filters provide row-level and column-level security within Lake Formation, but do not enable coexistence with IAM-based access. Question 15. A data engineer at Adatum Energy is setting up an AWS Glue ETL job that reads from an Amazon RDS PostgreSQL database within a VPC and writes transformed data to Amazon S3. The Glue job fails with a network connectivity error when trying to reach S3. The VPC has no internet gateway. Which combination of networking configurations must the data engineer implement? Select two, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option C. When AWS Glue runs within a VPC to access JDBC sources like RDS, it requires specific network configuration to reach S3. An S3 gateway endpoint provides private connectivity from the VPC to S3 without requiring internet access, and the endpoint must be added to the root table of the subnet where the Glue connection resides. The self-referencing security group rule, allowing all TCP inbound from itself, is required because Glue ETL workers communicate with each other during distributed Spark processing, and without this rule, worker-to-worker communication fails. An internet gateway would provide S3 access, but is not required when a gateway endpoint is available and may violate security policies. An interface endpoint for the Glue service is not needed for S3 access. A NAT gateway would work for S3 access, but adds cost compared to the free S3 gateway endpoint. Question 16. Adatum Travel operates a booking platform where application logs are sent to Amazon CloudWatch logs. The data engineering team needs to stream these logs to 3 different destinations simultaneously. Amazon S3 for long-term archival, Amazon OpenSearch service for real-time log analytics, and a third-party SIEM tool via an HTTPS endpoint. The team discovers that CloudWatch Logs supports a maximum of 2 subscription filters per log group. How should the data engineer architect this solution? Select one, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. Using a single CloudWatch log subscription filter to Kinesis data streams allows the data to be consumed by multiple downstream consumers. 3 separate Firehose delivery streams can read from the same Kinesis stream, each delivering to a different destination. S3 for archival, OpenSearch for analytics, and an HTTPS endpoint for the SIEM tool. This stays within the 2 subscription filter limit while serving all 3 destinations. A single Firehose delivery stream can only have one primary destination and cannot simultaneously deliver to S3, OpenSearch, and an HTTPS endpoint as separate targets. Using Lambda for fanout adds complexity and potential failure points. Configuring the SIEM to pull from S3 introduces latency and does not provide real-time log delivery. Question 17. A data engineer at Adatum Cloud is configuring Oz CloudTrail for a multi-account AWS organization. The security team requires that all API activity across all accounts is logged, including S3 object-level operations on a specific bucket containing financial reports. The logs must be stored in a centralized account and retained for 7 years with SQL query capability. Which combination of steps should the data engineer take? Select 2, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option C. An organization trail in the management account automatically logs API activity across all accounts in the AWS organization, including the ability to enable data events for specific S3 buckets to capture object-level operations like getObject and putObject. CloudTrail Lake provides a managed event data store with retention up to 10 years, built-in SQL query capability, and can federate into the Glue data catalog for Athena access. Creating individual trails in each account is operationally complex and does not scale for organizations. Delivering to S3 with Glacier Lifecycle provides storage, but CloudTrail Lake offers integrated querying without needing to manage S3 storage and Athena infrastructure separately. CloudTrail Insights detects unusual activity patterns, but does not address the logging and retention requirements. Question 18. A data engineer at Adatum Consulting needs to orchestrate a multi-step data pipeline that includes extracting data from a Salesforce instance, transforming it using AWS Glue, loading it into Amazon Redshift, and sending a notification upon completion. The Salesforce extraction must use a managed connector. Which combination of services should the data engineer use? Select 2, review the answer choices on screen. The correct answers are option A and option C. Amazon AppFlow is the managed SaaS integration service that provides native connectors for Salesforce and over 40 other SaaS applications, supporting scheduled and event-driven data extraction to S3 or Redshift. Oz Step Functions can orchestrate the entire pipeline by coordinating AppFlow flow execution, glue job runs, Redshift copy commands, and SNS notifications in sequence with error handling and retry logic. DMS does not support Salesforce as a source. It is designed for database-to-database migrations from sources like Oracle, MySQL, PostgreSQL, and SQL Server. Event Bridge Pipes provides point-to-point integrations between streaming sources and targets, but cannot orchestrate multi-step workflows involving AppFlow, Glue, and Redshift. Glue workflows can orchestrate crawlers and Glue jobs, but cannot natively trigger AppFlow flows or send SNS notifications. Question 19. A data engineer uses the Redshift copy command to load data from S3 into Redshift as part of an ETL process. The team wants to improve the efficiency of the current ETL process. Which additional step should be implemented? Select one answer. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option A. Temporary staging tables in Amazon Redshift receive data through copy commands with reduced overhead compared to permanent tables, because they do not trigger automatic incremental backups to S3 or require synchronous block mirroring for data redundancy. This makes copy operations into staging tables significantly faster. After loading, transformations can be applied to the staged data before the final insert into the production table, and the staging table is automatically dropped at the end of the session. The unload command exports query results from Redshift to S3 and is the opposite of what is needed for an ingestion process. S3 DISC-CP is an Amazon EMR tool for distributing data between S3 and HDFS and has no integration with Redshift. Redshift Spectrum creates external tables that reference S3 data for querying without loading. It is not a mechanism for improving the performance of loading data into Redshift tables. Question 20. A data engineer at Contoso Retail is setting up cross-account access to an S3 bucket. Account A owns the bucket containing sales data encrypted with SSCKMS using the default OZ/S3 managed key. Account B needs to read objects from this bucket. The data engineer has configured an S3 bucket policy granting Account B read access and an IAM policy in Account B allowing S3 get object. However, Account B users receive access denied errors. What is the root cause? Select one. Review the answer choices on screen. The correct answer is option B. When S3 objects are encrypted with SSCKMS, the reading principal must have KMS decrypt permission on the KMS key used for encryption. AWS managed KMS keys OZ/S3 have a key policy that only allows the owning account to use them. They cannot be shared cross-account. This means Account B users cannot decrypt objects encrypted with Account A's OZ/S3 key, resulting in access denied errors even with proper S3 permissions. The solution is to re-encrypt objects using a customer-managed KMS key and grant Account B KMS decrypt permission on that key. Listing individual IAM user ARNS is not required. Account-level grants work for cross-account access. S3 access points simplify access management but are not required for cross-account access. Block public access settings control public access, not cross-account access configured through bucket policies. That is the end of practice exam number 3. Review the questions you missed, then come back for the next batch.